regarding the internal settlement Strand 1. And we will be going back to the Balmoral Conference Centre shortly to hear the Prime Minister on that. But in the meantime, we will go to the Downtown Radio News Desk for some reaction to this morning's events so far with Patricia Wilkinson.
Good morning. Prime Minister John Major and Irish Premier John Bruton have released the contents of the framework document on the political way forward here. The main points of the document include the recognition of the right of Ulster people to choose their own destiny, the establishment of a cross-border body with limited and agreed executive powers, guarantees by the British and Irish governments to protect civil, political, social and cultural rights, and a commitment from the Irish government to rewrite Articles 2 and 3 on the South's constitutional claim to the North. Mr Major outlined how the North-South body would operate.
The North-South body that we outline would comprise elected representatives chosen from a new Northern Ireland Assembly and from the Irish Parliament. It would draw its authority from those two bodies. It would operate by agreement and only by agreement. On the United Kingdom side, the North-South body would initially be set up by legislation at Westminster as part of a balanced agreement. It would come into operation following the establishment of the new Northern Ireland Assembly. Thereafter, it would be for the Northern Ireland Assembly and the Irish Parliament both to operate the body and to decide whether its functions should be extended. Like all of our proposals, the new North-South institutions will be a matter for negotiation. But the way should now be open for beneficial cooperation between North and South without the constitutional tensions which have been such impediments in the past.
Irish Premier John Bruton gave an undertaking that the Dublin government would drop its territorial claim over the North.
The change proposed will address both Articles 2 and 3 of the Constitution in the following ways: to remove any jurisdictional or territorial claim of legal right over the territory of Northern Ireland contrary to the will of the people of Northern Ireland, and to provide that the creation of a sovereign United Ireland could therefore only occur in circumstances where a majority of the people of Northern Ireland formally chose to be part of a United Ireland.
Politicians have been listening to Mr Major and Mr Bruton and are now studying their statement. The DUP says the document is an eviction notice for Ulster to leave the United Kingdom. They say it's not a discussion document, but a joint government programme for Irish unity. Initial reaction from Alliance leader John Alderdice was that the document provided a basis for negotiation, not hysteria and alarm. But Gary McMichael from the Ulster Democratic Party says the document has to be studied carefully.
And we believe that the situation we find ourselves in and the issue involved here is far too important to be knee-jerking in any way. Any decision that we make as a result of our considerations of the document and its contents will be fair and just.
And Sinn Féin's Martin McGuinness has just given his fast response.
Well, it is a complex, fairly lengthy document, and it's a document which will be considered very carefully by the Sinn Féin leadership and the Sinn Féin membership, and we won't be given a considered position on it until after the Ardèche.
That's it. I'll be back with an update at 11 o'clock.
Northern Ireland's best station, downtown.
The news at 11 o'clock. I'm Patricia Wilkinson. Good morning. Prime Minister John Major and Irish Premier John Bruton have been outlining the contents of the framework document on the political way forward here. The main points of the document include the recognition of the right of Ulster people to choose their own destiny, the establishment of a cross-border body with limited and agreed executive powers, guarantees by the British and Irish governments to protect civil, political, social and cultural rights, and a commitment from the Irish government to rewrite Articles 2 and 3 on the South's constitutional claim to the North. Mr Major outlined how the North-South body would operate.
The North-South body that we outline would comprise representatives chosen from a new Northern Ireland Assembly and from the Irish Parliament. It would draw its authority from those two bodies. It would operate by agreement and only by agreement. On the United Kingdom side, the North-South body would initially be set up by legislation at Westminster as part of a balanced agreement. It would come into operation following the establishment of the new Northern Ireland Assembly. Thereafter, it would be for the Northern Ireland Assembly and the Irish Parliament both to operate the body and to decide whether its functions should be extended.
The Irish Premier says nationalists have also nothing to fear, with an undertaking by Britain to make legislative changes.
This document says that the British government will enshrine in its constitutional legislation the principles embodied in this new framework by either amendment to the Government of Ireland Act of 1920 or its replacement by appropriate new legislation.
Now look at the initial reaction to the document, and DUP leader Ian Paisley says he's in no doubt what it means.
This document is, as I have said, a declaration of war on the Union. Actually, it is the death warrant for the 1920 Act, which is the basis of our Union.
Meanwhile, Ulster Unionist security spokesman Ken McGuinness says he's bitterly disappointed by the document.
I think it's a horrendous document. I can't say anything other than that about it. It does seem to be a signal to the IRA, for goodness sake, when you recommence your campaign, don't bomb London. Concentrate your efforts on Northern Ireland. Beyond that, it is written in totally in the nationalist idiom. It's something that presents us with the inevitable cul-de-sac that we forecast.
And we leave the news just a little early to return to the Balmoral Conference Centre, where Prime Minister John Major is about to start round 2 of this morning's press conference. Let's go over to join Eamon Malley.
Let me say a few words to you about the Strand 1 document, the internal proposals for Northern Ireland.
Get on with it.
Over the past few months, normal life has been returning here in Northern Ireland. I think that's apparent to people in a range of ways. They're feeling the benefits of peace. They can see them in security for their families, in freedom to travel, and in the rapid improvement that we're seeing in the Northern Ireland economy. But normality must mean other things as well. It must also mean a return to normal political life. And what I would like to do now is to talk to you about the British government's proposals for new democratic arrangements within Northern Ireland. The document that we are publishing this morning has 2 objectives. First, to reinvigorate local democracy. For the last 22 years, Northern Ireland has been without an effective assembly. Local government representatives have enjoyed only very limited powers. And save for those who've been elected either to Westminster or to Strasbourg, Northern Ireland's political leaders have had few opportunities to exercise power and to bear the responsibilities of public service. Our proposals this morning seek to restore democratic accountability and to restore responsiveness to local needs in a way that meets the unique traditions and circumstances of Northern Ireland. The second objective is to contribute to an overall political settlement. To be effective, the Assembly must attract wide participation. It must enjoy the confidence of both of the main parts of the Northern Ireland community, and its best chance of achieving that is as part of a balanced 3-strand agreement. The Assembly will have a vital part to play, not only within Northern Ireland, but in managing and giving authority to new North-South institutions. Northern Ireland's representatives in the North-South body, of course, would be drawn from the Assembly and would be answerable to the Northern Ireland Assembly. Our proposals this morning will not surprise the parties to the talks process, because they stem from our discussions with them in 1991 and 1992 and subsequently. The proposals centre around an assembly of about 90 members. To meet Northern Ireland's particular needs, it would be elected by a form of proportional representation. The Assembly would discharge legislative and executive responsibilities across Northern Ireland, but it would not have tax-raising powers. We have proposed a committee system which would broadly reflect the strength of parties in the Assembly. The committees would oversee the work of the Northern Ireland departments. The chairman of those committees would become heads of department, taking over many of the responsibilities now exercised by the Ministers of State and the parliamentary under-secretaries at the Northern Ireland office. An additional proposal would be to establish a separate, directly elected panel, probably of 3 senior people, to carry out representational, consultative and monitoring functions. The effect of these proposals would be to distribute responsibilities fairly between the parties according to their electoral strengths and to give their senior representatives significant roles. For example, responsibility in the local management of health, education, housing or agriculture would be put back in the hands of Northern Ireland representatives. The United Kingdom government would continue to direct police and security matters, at least for so long as the army is required to act in support of the police. I believe that our proposals should reflect the province's unique character. An assembly with significant powers, where responsibility was shared fairly between the parties, would help to heal divisions. Both sets of our proposals are now in the public domain, and we shall now allow a period for debate and for discussion. I hope the people of Northern Ireland will take time to look closely at our ideas and then let us and their elected representatives have their views after that consideration and study. I am not setting a timetable for public consultation. When there's been time for opinions to crystallise, to mature, we will invite the political parties to consultations. We shall decide with them the best way of moving forward. Some parties have already made their own proposals, and I'm sure there will be many more suggestions to come. We will welcome constructive contributions from all quarters. We've set out what we believe to be a realistic framework for a lasting settlement. But the crucial talk will be to reach an agreed outcome in talks with the political parties and then to secure the consent of the people of Northern Ireland in a referendum. For the last 25 years, terrorism, sectarian violence in Northern Ireland have tested people's resilience and courage, sometimes to the utmost. I hope the people of Northern Ireland will never again have to face that challenge. What I've described this morning is a challenge of a different kind, the challenge of living in peace, of healing divisions, and of sharing responsibilities. To a community which has endured such remarkable strains over the past quarter of a century, that too is difficult. It will pose acute questions and it will demand hard decisions. But it is a challenge of hope, and it offers the prize of greater peace and stability than Northern Ireland perhaps has ever known in its long history. This morning, I simply ask people to put aside old fears and to be open to the opportunities that now lie ahead of them. We have set out those opportunities in the documents before people. Let them consider them, decide upon them, reflect upon them, and let us have their views in the weeks and months that lie ahead. Now let me take a few of the questions that you may have. Yes, gentleman in the third row.
Stuart Daugherty, Financial Times. Prime Minister, there's been much talk about dealing directly to the people of Northern Ireland, but the elected officials, elected representatives of the unionist community are DUP and the UUP. They have 12 of the 17 Westminster seats and over 300 of the 26 district council seats. In the past, these very same elected representatives have resigned their seats at Westminster when they felt they were needed by the past only to be re-elected by election. So partly speaking for the Royalist paramilitaries have a barely visible electoral mandate. The manifestos are at least obviously means that situations change somewhat and the pressures upon people are different. But can you really take the process forward, let alone have an assembly, if these people, this posing is control, say, well, the case is too high and we will not want it?
Well, the whole thrust of what I've been saying this morning is that we need to carry both the parties and the people with us. You say there's been a lot of talk about appealing over the heads of the parties to the people. Not by me, there hasn't. There may have been what some people have written. But I'm engaged and have been engaged in discussions with the parties. I hope to be engaged in discussions with the parties. And I think the people themselves have a right to know what is in detail in our proposals. That is why we're making that available to people. That's why I've said we'll have a referendum. But the question is, we need to continue our discussions with the parties. That is what we're going to do. We need to persuade. We need to bring them together so they can bring forward their ideas. They too will want to consult with their constituents. We're not engaged in anything other than a dialogue that seeks to embrace as many people as possible so that all those ideas can come forward. And of course we want the ideas of the political parties. That's what we've been discussing with them for the past 4 years. I would like to sit down with the political parties as soon as possible. Let them look at this. Let them reflect on this. Nobody is trying to cut the political parties out of the process. As I said in the earlier press conference, we need to persuade. We need to bring them with us. And that is the business that I am engaged in. Yes.
Prime Minister Billy Graham, Irish News. Is it the case that there will be no assembly in Northern Ireland until there is agreement on the other document presented earlier on? And do the same ground rules apply as did in the earlier talks that nothing is agreed and everything is agreed?
The answer is yes. They're all of a piece. Yes.
Prime Minister, is it true that if you have an assembly and the Unionists refuse to participate in the outside bodies, it does say in the other document that you can, if they refuse, in some way force them to or enforce them to?
Well, let me deal with that matter. And let me draw perhaps an analogy that will put this particular matter in context. In the United Kingdom government, I have a number of ministers of state and parliamentary secretaries. Part of their responsibilities is to attend the European Community committees and represent the United Kingdom government there. That, if you like, is a duty of service, part of their job as ministers. No one is providing onerous sanctions on the heads of the assembly committees to attend. We are saying these committees will be established, firstly, only after discussion with the parties, secondly, only after a referendum, thirdly, only after the parliamentary legislation, fourthly, after the establishment of the Assembly, fifthly, after election of the Assembly, sixthly, after the appointment of the chairman, the departmental heads from within the Assembly. And then we are asking the departmental heads to play their democratic role in representing the Assembly, being answerable to the Assembly in the North-South bodies. Now, that is exactly the same duty of service that my ministers have in going to the European Union and representing the views of the United Kingdom. It's not some onerous, harsh task that is laid upon them where they are taken away in chains and condemned to go and sit down in a North-South Assembly. That is, to put it modestly, something of a misrepresentation that has got about over recent weeks. Yes.
Prime Minister David Davenpower, RTE News. How important do you view the role of the three-person panel that you've provided for? And is that an essential component of these proposals?
No, I can't say it's essential. The political parties, it's been suggested by more than one political party now, not all of them, but by more than one. It isn't essential, but I think many people see it as an attractive option to ensure fair play. What we see as perhaps the position of the three senior people who would be this panel, they would perhaps have a role in the selection of heads of departments with the Assembly. They would perhaps have a role in discussions on public appointments. They would perhaps have a role in scrutinising some of the particularly controversial legislation. That and other issues would need to be discussed with the political parties as to what their role is. But if you wanted to crystallise it, I suppose they're there to ensure fair play. But the Assembly could operate without them. If the political parties decided in discussion that they didn't want the panel, then that would not abort the proposals. They are something that are seen as a useful addition to the Assembly, but they are not of necessity a part of the package that would necessarily need to be there for the rest of the package to work. Yes.
Prime Minister, in paragraph 10 in relation to the Assembly, the Northern Ireland Secretary of State will still have substantial powers related to Northern Ireland due to law and order and financial matters. But you also say that in the talk process, the relationship between the Assembly, Prime Minister, and the Secretary of State could be further discussed. And does that mean that it is potentially an Assembly with dominion status autonomy, and in other words, substantial autonomy separated from Westminster, or do you see this Assembly in a more minimalist fashion?
Well, I think you put two extremes, and I don't see it with respect in either of those extremes. You started off by talking of the law and order responsibilities. British Army have been in Northern Ireland for a long time. They will stay there for as long as it is necessary to protect the people of Northern Ireland. Nobody should be in a shred of doubt about that. Certainly for so long as the British Army are there, I cannot conceive the British government devolving to any extent the law and order responsibilities that legitimately are theirs at the moment. At some stage in the future, and it is certainly not in the imminent future, at some stage in the future, if the Assembly wished to take more powers for law and order, that would certainly be something we could discuss with them. But that would be a matter for the Northern Ireland Assembly to discuss with the British government of the day and make decisions about that. As far as the status of the Assembly is concerned, it's going to have significant legislative responsibilities. It will pass its own legislation. It will, within its own block vote, seek to determine what legislation it wishes to pass. So it is going to have significant responsibilities, but it is not going to have tax-raising powers. And it is a unique proposition. We have in Northern Ireland a different circumstance than applies anywhere else in the United Kingdom for historical reasons and for a range of other reasons as well. And it is to seek to respond directly to the unique tradition and history of Northern Ireland that we propose an assembly of this sort. So neither Dominion Assembly nor Assembly without powers. It lies in the middle of that, with legislative powers and executive powers of significance, but it is not an assembly. Yes, at the back.
In your opening address this morning, Prime Minister, you said the British government is engaged in talks with paramilitaries on both sides, not parties associated with paramilitaries.
Political representatives of paramilitaries.
So that's a point of clarification. Political representation, so certainly not directly with paramilitaries.
No, it's the political representatives of the paramilitaries.
Can I just ask a brief further question on that basis then? If so far the DUP response has been less than warm, have you had any indications that perhaps the parties associated with loyalist paramilitaries have been more favourable to the framework?
Well, we've only launched the framework document this morning. We must wait and see what people's more mature views are. I had the opportunity of briefing the DUP yesterday, last evening, though some members of the DUP had expressed views prior to the briefing. But I had the opportunity of briefing them last night. The document is now in public. They'll no doubt wish to consider and reflect on it over a period. Now, I think that is the only way we're going to get considered views. Snatching at views by anyone, whichever view they may hold, whether it is absolutely right or not. It is a complex document in many ways, and it will bear study and it will bear consideration. It will then bear discussion with Northern Ireland ministers to clarify points where they're open to misunderstanding. We have seen some misunderstandings over recent weeks following leaks in various places of what was in the document. And that is what I expect to happen next. And I think that will bring people closer. to a mature view of what this document is about and what it seeks to achieve. Yes, just here.
Can I ask, Robbie DeWitty from the Herald newspaper of Boston, can I ask about the extent to which the new North-South body will be answered the new Assembly? There will be a unionist minority, presumably, on the North-South body. It's going to have some executive powers or envisaged for it. Will the new Northern Ireland Assembly, in effect, have a veto on anything decided by the North?
It would need to be by agreement. It would need to be by agreement in the North-South body. And so the agreement, I mean, you put it in terms of a veto. You put it harshly. There would need to be agreement, yes. If I could draw again a European parallel, decisions wouldn't be taken by qualified majority vote, but by unanimity. Yes.
Yes, sir. I have to say, I've just been listening to the radio output, and the unionists are literally fulminating, sir, against the backdrop of what has been announced here this morning. People like Ken McGuinness, Ian Paisley. Do you have a plan B if all this falls flat on its face?
It's helpful to get a constructive question from you, Eamon. I have not yet heard what the unionists have to say, and I doubt that they have had a chance to discuss this in any detail. I know they've had a chance to pick up points that they're concerned with Northern Ireland ministers. So I said earlier, we must wait and see how this matter develops and what the opinion is right across the province. I have to say some of the early reports that I got were not precisely as you described, but we must wait and see. Yes.
Jerry Murray, from the Irish Times. Mr. Major, you referred to the principle of consent and the veto, but is there not, in effect, a British government veto on how things progress? I refer to paragraph 47 of the framework document, where you say if the Gulf institutions don't carry out wishes or whatever, the British government can more or less impose a default system to ensure that there is North-South cooperation. Is that not in effect a take or leave it position by the British government?
No, it isn't. In areas where there are disagreement, both the British government within its own jurisdiction and the Irish government, for that matter, within its own jurisdiction, will see if it can find a way in which agreement can be reached. The proposition that this is some heavy-handed activity to coerce people into doing that which they are not keen to do scarcely bears credible intellectual examination against the background of everything we have been seeking to do over recent months, by agreement, by consultation, by discussion, by unanimity. So the answer to your question is no, it isn't a question of vetoes. We're seeking to, if difficulties arise following the establishment of the body, to find a way through those difficulties, not jointly, not London and Dublin getting together to put pressure on the unionists, or London and Dublin getting together to put pressure on the nationalists. That is not the way. If there was disagreement on the UK side or South body, matter for the UK government to try and find a way through. If there was disagreement on the Irish side of the North-South body, it would be for the Irish government to try and find a way through. Yes, at the back. Yes, you. Yes.
How close are Sinn Féin to being allowed direct access to Sir Patrick Mayhew, to Michael Ancram, to yourself, sir, to talk about the proposals that you've launched today? How close are they?
Well, they're not there yet. They're not there yet. We're talking to the political representatives, as I indicated earlier, and we shall need some more progress. I can't tell you how close they are because I don't know how those talks are going to progress in the future. As those talks progress, we have made it clear that it will be practicable to talk to British ministers, but it has to be when we have reached a state in the talks where a British minister needs to be involved in the talks because there is something concrete of real significance that requires ministerial input. We are not there yet. I can't tell you when that will be. The day will come, I hope, but I can't myself tell you when because I don't know how they're going to respond further in the talks that are yet to come. Yes.
Prime Minister Niall Donnelly, UTV, how would you convince nationalists that this new assembly that you propose, particularly Republicans, is in any way in their interests and that they won't see it as just another British institution? And also the fact that you propose a three-member panel to oversee it mean you don't trust the main unionist parties to be a majority there?
Well, when you say we propose a three-member panel, that proposition as does the whole of, virtually the whole of Strand 1, have actually emanated from our discussions with the political parties. This isn't something that Paddy Mayhew's gone into a locked room and suddenly dreamed up. It's actually emerged from discussions with the political parties. In particular, that was SDLP were very keen on that, since you refer to the nationalist community, and it was in, if I remember correctly, an Ulster Unionist as well. So these ideas are actually there. And therein, I think, lies the key to the first half of your question, how to convince nationalists or indeed unionists. Well, one way, I think, is to the number of things that are in here that have sprung directly out of discussions with them, documents they've produced, speeches they've made, and so forth. The second point, of course, is to point to the changed circumstances that exist in Northern Ireland. Every politician wants to entrench the improved circumstances of today and build upon them. They may have a different idea of how they do it. That is certainly the case, going back to Eamon's question of a few moments ago. That is certainly the case. But they all want to make that progress. These documents are a way of doing that. If some people wish other ways of doing it, they will bring forward those other ways of doing it. The reassurance to the nationalists and the unionists is what I said earlier, what the Taoiseach reaffirmed more than once. This isn't a blueprint. This isn't descriptive. This isn't saying take it or leave it. This is saying take it, examine it, accept it, or reject it. The choice is yours. And I think that is the right way to try and bring the historical divisions that have existed in the community in Northern Ireland together. It is the only way, I think, that will bring them together. Maybe slow, maybe difficult, maybe painful, but I know of no other way to get this cart to the top of the hill. Yes.
Earlier, Prime Minister, of enhancing community identification.
Sorry, could you speak up a fraction?
Sorry. Earlier in the earlier document, you spoke of enhancing community identification in policing in Northern Ireland, and you mentioned that the Assembly could have responsibility for law and order. Now, how do you envisage, in that context, the argument? Do you envisage separate police forces in Northern Ireland?
Well, we certainly envisage fully civilian policing at some stage in the future. I've seen some pretty garish propositions that have been around about changing the RUC, which I certainly don't remotely recognise. For the foreseeable future, and I don't know how long that will be, but certainly quite a considerable time, the responsibility for law and order in Northern Ireland will remain that of the British government. If that is ever changed, it will be changed following discussions with the Northern Ireland Assembly, and in part or whole it may be devolved to the Northern Ireland Assembly. But that is some way down the road. Nobody need fear precipitate changes. The thing that I am most concerned about is the proper maintenance of law and order in the province, and that will remain the case in the future. Yes, the gentleman at the back.
Robert Allen from London Radio. I've looked through the text of your speech earlier on. I couldn't see mention of the handing over of weapons, which possibly could be the next concrete step in the process. Was it a deliberate omission on your part?
We weren't discussing, no, of course not. We weren't discussing the discussions with the paramilitaries at the moment. I made the position of decommissioning of weapons clear here in Northern Ireland on a number of occasions in the future. But that is a separate series of discussions. They're going on in parallel, and they're very important. They are the discussions going on with the political representatives of Sinn Féin and of the Protestant paramilitaries, and those are the sort of things we're discussing with them. But it is not a part of these particular documents this morning. It is something we're carrying along in parallel. Certainly our intention to proceed with decommissioning as soon and as effectively as we are able to do so. Yes.
John Campbell of the Financial Times. You talk about allowing the document to mature, giving them time to absorb it, to consider it, etc. You are impelled to a certain extent by the threat of a resumption of violence by either or both of the paramilitaries. It could also conceivably be the case that the unionists agree to talk about talks, agree to talks, modify their language. But in the end, they apparently may use this as a ruse to stick by the status quo. How are you going to reconcile those two imperatives, one to hurry and one to slow down?
Well, you point out the difficulties. I'm, with respect, pretty well aware of the difficulties. You might equally have pointed out similar difficulties 2 years ago as to whether we would have made the progress that we have made thus far. 2 years ago, I dare say if I held this press conference, you would not have expected agreement with the Irish government on a joint declaration, universally, I think, accepted across the political mainstream in Northern Ireland. You would not have expected 6 months of peace. You would not have expected that it would have been practical to have made these agreements this morning. You would not have expected commitments on Articles 2 and Articles 3 of the Irish Constitution. There are a whole range of other things that I could add to that you would not have expected 2 years ago. Now, you are right to point to the difficulties ahead. I am acutely conscious of the difficulties ahead. They are undoubtedly there. So are the opportunities. We have taken the hurdles one at a time. Thus far, we have cleared the hurdles. So far, so good. We must set out the hurdles that are ahead of us and see if we can clear those one by one as well. I don't promise it'll be easy, but I do passionately believe that it is possible, and there is no doubt that it is necessary. Yes.
Mark Anthony, News. Prime Minister, it seems clear that the Unionist reaction to the information being unveiled today, no doubt, will focus a lot of your attention. Paragraph 20 of the framework document, I note that it is said that the British government will not impede if the people of Northern Ireland choose the option of a united Ireland. Will Unionists not read that the British government has joined the ranks of the persuaders?
Well, it's a curious way to persuade, to firstly persuade the Irish government to change Articles 2 and 3, and secondly to say the choice is undilutedly there for the people of Northern Ireland, and to reaffirm, as I did just a few moments ago, that the British Army will stay here to protect people in Northern Ireland for as long as that may be necessary if they're under threat, and to enshrine in every document we produced the right of the people of Northern Ireland to choose to remain in the United Kingdom if they wish. That is not persuasion. That is, it's saying to people, it is your choice. And we, the British government, will honour that choice, will uphold that choice, will defend that choice with all we can and with all that we might have to do